You'll find this unusual that I would respond in this way, but it's an issue about regulation that I dealt with the last couple of years, and that's the regulation of medical marijuana dispensaries and how we're going to deal with that issue in Colorado. I don't know if that's what you're asking for or not, but as part of the regulatory scheme that we have in Colorado, when we were asked, after the voters passed in 2000, the medical marijuana amendment in our Constitution, we were then required to put some kind of regulation in place to try to stop the incredible growth of the industry, not only from the dispensary standpoint, but from the consumer, if you will. When we started this medical marijuana issue in 2000, between 2000 and 2008, there were, give or take, somewhere between 1,700 and 2,000 medical marijuana cards in the state of Colorado. Since 2008, we now have almost 125,000. Something makes me think these aren't all seriously ill patients. Yeah, and there are, I believe I heard something like 800 or 900 dispensaries in the state of Colorado, and fortunately, one of the things that we did in the regulation of this industry is to give a local option, the option to local municipalities, counties, communities to decide whether or not they wanted to open their communities to dispensaries, or now what we call centers, or not. And I think we're finding more and more often that communities are not welcoming dispensaries. In fact, I just read in, I believe, this morning's paper that the city of Centennial has decided to continue their ban on dispensaries. I think that's a good thing. We still have probably some work to do, but we're on our way to some responsible regulation that we hadn't had before. That's my experience with regulation in the last 2 years.
There's always, at times, unintended consequences when you pass a bill or a piece of legislation. So one of the things I've really tried to work hard at in my 3 years as serving as a state representative from District 9, Southeast Denver, is to try to be a good listener. As I mentioned, there's a lot of lobbyists, but there's also a lot of citizens that come down and to say, hey, can I have 5 minutes of your time to express my opinion on this bill, whether they face-to-face visit with you or a phone call or an email. And a lot of times you get to talk to an expert who's been in an industry, let's say, for 22 years. And on the bill, or the example I mentioned earlier about solar and wind financing for your home, I sat down with Rachel and Wes and about 25 stakeholders and had 13 meetings over the course of a year to make sure that when this bill got drafted, it went through many revisions to say, hey, am I going to do an unintended consequence that's going to overburden, overregulate? What I found interesting when Governor Hickenlooper's a staffer who just got back from touring the state. He met with civic and business and other leaders in all regions of the state of Colorado. What he found when the topic of red tape or bureaucracy came up, it was a variety of whether it was federal, state, or local, and about half of the concerns tended to be permitting or local issues. So he tried to steer constituents, towards the proper local government authority. If it was state, then he, took notes and tried to address it. Now, if it's federal, then he can make some calls to one of our senators or congresspersons. That was the biggest challenge that he briefed me on in terms of making sure people know what agency to call at the local, state, or federal level. But people in our position, we've got to be good listeners to make sure that we can reduce unintended consequences. I strongly supported the bill, as by Representative Tom Massey, who Representative Holbert referenced earlier. I was offended that individuals who had bought multi-acres or plots of land, like Tom Cruise, the actor, were paying maybe $300 to $400 a year for multi-thousands of pieces of acre by claiming it was agricultural intended or use, and there was really no agricultural activity going on. When legislation passed many years before I was in the legislature, I think 10, 20 years ago, there was a rightful tax incentive for our family farmers and ranchers. And by the way, I come from a family farm in Michigan, Milan, Michigan. It's still in the family farm, or still in the family, almost 100 years. That was the intent for the legislation. But like a lot of times, lawyers and other smart stakeholders can find loopholes, and many people that didn't use it for ag land were getting a tax break that we were paying for. And Representative County talked about all the cuts we made to schools and other areas. That's money we could have saved to invest in K through 12 or other valuable resources. So I strongly supported that bill.
I was actually opposed to it, and the fundamental reason in talking with the assessor in Douglas County, she was very quick to point out that bill took away the authority, discretionary authority of the county assessor. That's an elected official in each of the counties, and our elected official, our elected assessor, had the discretion to solve this problem in his or her county. Once again, we step in at the state capitol and effectively issue a mandate to say, you can't have that discretion, you've got to do it this way. In Douglas County, we have a lot of land that fits the description that Representative McCloskey described, and that's okay. One of the things that I want to be careful about is the developers who have bought large tracts of land during the housing boom have had to sell that land off, have lost land, and that's not something that's good for your industry. It's not good for the state of Colorado, and if there's people who are holding onto that land and delaying development plans and able to hold that land in a sort of a status that makes it financially reasonable for them to wait, then I like that option being available, and I like having my county assessor having the discretion to work with our county commissioners and those developers who will build out northern Douglas County. That's a good scenario for us. So to have people from other parts of the state step in and say, you can't do that and we want more tax money, well, you might get more tax revenue, but you also might have more bankrupt developers and home builders, and again, that's not something I'm going to support.
My understanding on that bill was that it was simply, again, usurping some local control that existed, and that our county assessors had the ability to step in and to deal with that situation. It was full within their realm and power, and I'm always going to do my darndest to stay with local control. I think that that is the fundamental nature of Coloradans. We enjoy that local control in the areas that we live. We enjoy the differences that, that Parker offers, and the difference in its regulatory and its tax environment, conversely to Boulder. And there is a huge chasm between that, and that is one of the joys of living here. You can choose the community that best suits your lifestyle and your desire for control and regulation or lack thereof. So I believe I was opposed to that.
Let me just preface my remarks by saying I was carrying with this President of the Senate a measure this year that would have referred to the voters, a measure to increase the number of votes needed to pass a constitutional amendment. Part of the reason that was so timely was because of the issues that were on the ballot last year that had to do with those tax issues. As we were preparing and moving that resolution of ours through the Senate and over to the House, where we were going to try to get the whole thing done in 1 week, it ended up taking 2.5 months, and then it died the last day of the session. Having said that, after we filed that resolution, we found that there was another proposal, a resolution filed to require that there be 60% of the voters voting in favor of any tax increase. It was kind of, and then we heard that the negotiations were going on, that if we drop our resolution, they'd drop theirs. And as it was, ours went away the last day of the session, and theirs went away too. And it's the kind of thing now that really disturbs me when we would carry, or a citizen would carry an initiative, and then there'll be an opposing initiative to hold you hostage or to trade off. Well, we'll drop ours if you'll drop yours. And that's just not the way government is supposed to work, and it's disappointing to me. I thought we had a really sound proposal that had the support of probably realtors. It certainly had the support of all the chambers and most businesses in Colorado to require that, number one, that signatures be gathered for a constitutional amendment from all 7 congressional districts. Right now, someone who's carrying a petition can go up and down 16th Street or stand in front of King Soopers and get all in the metro area and get all the signatures they need, which really disenfranchises the rest of Colorado in terms of being involved in the constitution of our state and what it should be and should not be. Colorado's constitution has been amended 150 times since it was adopted. And now we have such a mess. We have Tabor, we have Amendment 23, we have the Gallagher Amendment, causing such conflict in our Constitution that the University of Denver has done a study saying that we'll no longer be able to fund the state of Colorado if we don't do something about the conflicting amendments in our Constitution. And so we've got to do that. We've got to do something about that. Until we, I think, get our initiative process sorted out, it's going to be pretty tough to do anything with regard to the referendum